I recognize that you are going through something I cannot experience, but my heart is with you.
This hurts so much because this mattered. And since this mattered, it needs to be grieved and honored. And then I let it go until it comes back again.
The grief itself remains part of you because it's part of your story. You can't just say, oh, I'm over that.
Welcome to the She Word, conversations that women rarely have but really should. Now, before we get going, I would just like you to just look below here. If you're joining us on YouTube, somewhere under there, you're going to find a subscribe button. Hit that subscribe button. If you're listening to us on Spotify, find that subscribe button and join us on that channel as well, because we have a whole season to finish here on the She Word. And on top of that, we have many other things coming your way. Women in Business. We also have the Young Women's Edition. We have another season of this coming out later this year. And of course, we have the He Word coming as well. So that's what you want to be doing right now. Make sure that you are subscribed. If you're joining us on the Patreon page, thank you very much indeed. You are seeing this before anybody else. And by doing so, you're doing something very, very special. Because 50% of the profits of the Patreon page goes directly to the Richmond Foundation to support women who cannot afford therapy or counselling or guidance. So we want to say a massive thank you to you. You are very special people. Speaking of special people, we have a fairly incredible show lined up for you right now. The strapline for the She Word is conversations that women rarely have but really should. And as we head further and further into this podcast, I'm always surprised when she-worders come back to me and say, hey, listen, you should really be talking about this topic because you haven't done that yet. And I think about these topics and I'm thinking, why haven't we discussed these topics that are being suggested? And this topic in this episode is exactly one of those conversations. The topic today is about grief. And it's far from an easy topic to discuss. But because it affects every single human being on this planet, it's a conversation that we really need to have. Stef Deguara is a familiar face in theatre circles, larger than life and a beautiful lady who is currently dealing with living grief as her beloved mother slips away over a long illness. Steph, thank you so much, not only for being here, but also suggesting this show as well. And we're going to come to that in just a second. Alison Kelly, hello. I am so glad that you could be here on this show. You've spoken out recently about your loss of your son and also the battle that you've had with breast cancer. You've motivated and inspired so many women by being so open about that topic. And we're going to come to you in just a second for more information about you. Anna Borg Bartolo is a counselling psychologist, a Gestalt Psychotherapist, which I'll be asking you about later on, with a special interest in grief and assisting those people who are in a grieving process. So I want to say thank you so much for being here. You know what, Anna, I'm going to stick with you. First of all, before we go into everything else that you do, what is Gestalt Psychotherapy?
It is actually Gestalt.
Oh, I'm so glad you corrected me on that one.
Well, it's a particular perspective. It's an orientation which allows you to look at people's behaviors, people's thoughts in a way that will help you to understand. So it's a perspective, how you look at people's behavior. Basically, Gestalt means whole, something which is holistic, right? So we always feel the need to find meaning in whatever happens to us. And by finding meaning, we create a sense of completeness. And we look for completeness. If I had to draw two lines close to each other and somehow nearly touching each other, what your mind does is it closes them up. We go like that in our mind. So we have this need to look at form, to look at things that are complete.
Okay. And I'm assuming that also applies when you're dealing with a grief situation.
Of course. So with grief, what we do is we create a narrative, we create a story. So people, when they come, they tell you their story. And there will be the event. And the event is a death, is a long goodbye, dementia, for example. But then they have the story surrounding it. And the way you place that story, the meaning that you put towards it, dictates the level of grief that you have and how you grieve and what meaning you put to it.
See, I'm really glad you're joining us because we have two ladies with incredible stories at the table, and I think that's going to be a really great way to look at their narrative too. So, Anna, thank you so much for being here. Steph, I'm coming to you. As I mentioned, you originally said to me you need to talk about grief, and it really was one of those topics that I said, why have we not done this before? Because like so many other subjects, it touches absolutely every single person's life in one way or another. But tell me a little bit more about you and a little bit about your story that you're dealing with at the moment.
So my story started in 2019. I was abroad. I had been noticing my mother having certain changes in character, but it was a bit light back then. And I took her first to her medical doctor, which was the family doctor, let's say. And the first thing he said, it's a depression, she's old, it's depression, just give her pills, just give her antidepressants and she'll be fine. But I started noticing that it was a bit more than a depression, because the depression symptoms were there, yes, but it was a bit more of confusion rather than just the depressing symptoms. And we started taking her to different doctors, and eventually, after a long process of tests and stuff, she was diagnosed with dementia. And I did a course in dementia, the first thing I did, to try and learn how to cope with this thing. And what I've learned from that course is that there are over 100 types of dementia, and that my mother has one called Lewy body, which attacks also the nervous system. It's like Parkinson's and dementia together. So that is why she is soon to be bedridden now. She barely walks, she barely talks, and this is 4 years down the line. But there's been like 3 stages of this. There was the first stage, which was the confusion and the depression. And the depression comes about also because she was still somehow aware, and she was understanding somehow what was happening to her. So she started realizing that she's not 100% there. For example, she used to hide her purse in the oven, and she couldn't find it, then we find it in the oven, for example. And when she used to find it, she used to say, but I didn't put it there. Mm. And there she started realizing that something is wrong with her as well. And I think this is why, correct me if I'm wrong, they go into a state of sort of depression, because they understand that slowly their mind is changing and something is happening to them. Mm-hmm. In my mother's case, the second stage was hallucinations. Mm. And this was the worst stage of all. And this happened 2 months after a very sudden breakup for me. I was about to get married a couple of months later. So I went through this unexpected breakup, which is also another form of grief.
Of course. Sure.
And just about a month or after this breakup, she went into the hallucination stage. And this was the worst to handle for all the family, because she used to have these episodes where she would just lose it. I used to grab her by the face and say, Ma, it's me, talk to me. And she would be seeing this scene, for example, someone killing a kid.
Oh my gosh.
And she used to shout, like, stop him, he's gonna kill him. And I'm grabbing her face, I'm like, Ma, it's me.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't just snap out of it. And after that, which was the toughest time, even because I was in a very bad place in my life, because this is something I need to say about a long grief, that whilst this is happening, life happens to us all.
Sure, of course.
The good and the bad. It's work, it's breakups, it's marriage, it's everything. Life happens to us. And somehow we need to navigate through all of that.
But I would be right in describing yours as a living grief because it's an ongoing grief. And I know that Anna has a particular phrase for that, and we'll come to that in just a second. But thank you. We're going to delve further into your story as we go through this episode. But I want to just introduce Alison as well, because Alison, I contacted you late one night.
Yes.
You were recommended to me by a friend as somebody who had been through a very challenging journey and that might be able to talk about it. You have an extraordinary story with regards to going through an IVF process to have a son. You gave birth to a son. Your son Jack had a lot of complications and your time with him was very short. But you share this story. And then after that, you then find out that you have breast cancer. And so you're grieving on two levels, because I think we ignore the fact that if you have a physical challenge, that's also a grief process. But that I'm going to stop introducing you there and let you fill in the gaps.
I really know what you're saying, because amidst all what you have said now, my mother also went through Parkinson's, and I also went through the grieving phase. I grieved her for 15 years before she passed away, because Parkinson's is a tough cookie.
It's a really cruel disease.
It's really horrible. And my mother was about 43 when she was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So I was pretty young. So I can really, she didn't have dementia, but she had the hallucinations and spot on. She used to terrify me. I adored her. And she died 6 months after my son died. So I had a double whammy there. They still gave me a chance, because nowadays he's out of me. He's going to be taken care of in the incubator. So he was born alive. He was gorgeous. But he didn't make it. It took him 2 days. And I had to say goodbye, you know? He was a long-awaited baby, long-awaited baby. And terrifying.
And if you search for you, Alison, online, you can read that whole story in a lot more detail as well. And I would recommend to anybody to do so, because it is a beautiful story, and the way that you approach it is stunning. And I'm really... it's one of those things you don't know quite what to say. I'm sorry for your loss. And we'll talk about the challenge that you had after that as well in just a few moments, because that wasn't the end of your grieving process, because then you had breast cancer as well. And we'll come to that in just a moment. But I want to, now that we've got to know you and got to know Steph and got to know Anna, I want to just run through some statistics and some things that I want to throw onto the table. And then we're going to look at how we deal with grief and how you've dealt with grief in whatever capacity that is, and come up with some suggestions and some ideas and some discussions about grief and what it does to us and how we can approach to deal with it. So I want to just say thank you, first of all, for both of you sharing your stories. And there's a lot more to share, I know. And Anna, thank you for being here. And I love the fact that you're nodding, because all the way through these stories that Alison and Steph have just shared, you're nodding away. So you obviously are understanding their processes. Yeah. But one of the statistics that I read was that the length of time that someone grieves will depend on you and your circumstances and the type of significant loss you've experienced. On average, normal grief can last anywhere between 6 months to 2 years, or maybe a little bit more. Research shows that many people find their grief starts to improve within about 6 months after a loss. And this is why I'm reading statistics, because this is probably what we are being told is normal. When grief is overwhelming and powerful, it can seem to have no end. Grief this extensive and is called complicated grief, which affects between 10 and 20% of grievers. The most common causes of grief are death, divorce, loss of job, loss of health, death of a pet, or loss of a home. And these are all major events for which people can grieve. According to an article from the Psychiatric Times, 40% of grievers meet the criteria for major depression 1 month after their loss, and 24% still meet the criteria after 2 months. Now, according to statistics that I've just read out, and you can find any of this online, it's consistent, the grieving process lasts between 6 months to 2 years. However, my grandmother outlived my grandfather for nearly 20 years. And I can't recall a single occasion where she mentioned his name without welling up and crying. Right. And when I asked her, she said she would open her eyes every morning. And she was a formidable, amazing, tiny little Welsh woman. But she would still said she would wake up every morning and she would almost live the grief again because she's realized again that he wasn't there. And she was living her life, but she never got over losing him. Mm-hmm. And in fairness, he was the most extraordinary man. So I'm asked my first question, and I think for each of you to answer in your own way, and Anna to guide us here, why do we feel that we have to put a time frame on grief? Mm-hmm. Should we put a time frame on grief? And how does grief continue to manifest itself? And I think, Steph, even for you, because you're in a living grief situation. But why do we feel like, I'm British, right? So you quite often get someone saying, oh, buck up, move on, get on with it. And I'm sure that applies, as I'm seeing Steph nod her head and Alison's reaction. That is something that you've obviously heard. But why do we feel like we have to put a framework on it?
Because grief is painful. It's very painful. It's very dark. It is extremely painful. It's the dark pits of human emotion. That's why we need to put a time frame to it. We need to put a deadline to it. We need to contain it. We need to somehow feel that we are in control.
That it's going to be over.
When it's not. We can't really contain it. We can't really put a stop to it. Nobody likes to feel pain. Who likes to do that? You have to be a masochist in order for you to enjoy feeling pain. So we avoid it. We package it. We put platitudes on it, condolences, and all this rubbish. And even in psychiatric journals, we talk about 2 years being a decent time frame for grief. And then after that, then it is, now it's become a disorder. Now we start to worry, we start nodding our head and say, you should have moved on by now.
But how does that work for Steph? How does it work for you? Because you're in a living grief situation.
Anticipatory grief, it's called, in anticipation of. We are anticipating death. But really and truly, you are losing already. You lose the person with the dementia, you lose them, you lose bits of them, parts of them, you lose experiences with them.
Which is the same for both of these ladies.
Yes,
They're both experiences.
Of course. But you lose so much. You don't just lose the person, but you lose also your dream of having a baby, of being a mother, the fun that you're going to have, the idea, what you're going to do with the baby. All of that.
Of course, everybody's having a baby around you.
You're not part of the mother club anymore. You don't belong. And you lose that. So you lose the beauty of that, the dream. It's not just of course, you miss the actual baby, but there's also, it's just reverberates into a lot of other losses.
But can I ask you, actually, I'm going to ask these ladies, because you said that there is, and I read, and with almost disbelief, that there's a framework of between 6 months and 2 years.
2 years and beyond that early. That's the early stage of grief. 2 years is the early stage.
But as you said, after that period, it then is referred to, or can be referred to, as a disorder, because you're going to go into extended grief. So I'm going to ask you guys. Anna's just herself said that is not the case. Did you, I mean, Steph, you're in your situation, and Alison's nodding frantically away. I'm assuming that 2-year benchmark is just a load of crap.
Are you sure it's 2, not 20? Because mine has been 20.
Yes, there you go.
I've moved on, of course. I mean, I look very positively at life when I'm sane, or not when I was in that black hole that you're talking about. But today, I think that if Jack didn't make it, I wouldn't have adopted my son. Because I would have had Jack. I would have loved to have Jack. But then first of all, I couldn't even fathom the fact of me having a baby, because I had gone through hell and back. I couldn't, you know? And then I went to Africa, and there he was.
Oh,
but did you feel like, I mean, you must have gone through a grief process to be able to do that. Did you feel like this 2-year frame time or period is not achievable? Because you just said this happened to you 20 years ago, but you still speak about it with incredible passion and emotion. I'm assuming,
of course,
that's 2-year time frame.
And I cry. Maybe one day yes, one day no now. Not every day. Yes. But I mean, and I still think, you know, my oldest son, Jordan, is 21. And I'd say Jack would be 19 going on to 20. And then I have Ollie.
Yes.
I always think what he'd be doing.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
That's right.
He's one of us.
Yes. So grief changes, but it remains there.
Yes.
So it's just, the grief itself remains part of you because it's part of your story. You can't just say, oh, I'm over that. It becomes a part of you, but you remember it differently. She said, I remember with a smile. You remember it differently. You don't feel immediate pain. You feel the love. That is the difference. That the relationship remains the same. It keeps going. You talk about Jack, you talk about him, how old he is, how old he would be now, and what he'd be doing. So the relationship remains the same. But you get bigger, and your life gets bigger around it.
Steph?
I think I deal with it a bit differently. So I've been through the black hole as well, obviously. Especially when I had my breakup and my mother going to the second stage together, that was my black hole. And I was in that stage where I didn't want to live anymore. Nothing made sense. The two people I loved the most in my life disappeared. So
exactly,
because this is the realization when you call your mom to have a conversation and you cannot have it.
Of course.
You bought a dress and you want her, and you cannot have that. Or you're cooking something and you forgot how to cook it, and you cannot have that conversation. And that's where you realize that person
is
gone. And I was very, very close to my mom, always. Although she had me at 41, which back then was
different,
unheard of, because she went to the doctor because she was feeling unwell, and they told her, you're pregnant. It was after 10 years of my siblings, my siblings are 10 and 13 years older than me. So she was like, I'm 41, I cannot be pregnant. And she says, you were a mistake, but you were the best mistake that ever happened to me. And I was very, very close, although there's a bit of an age gap, because my mother is obviously 40 years older than me. So after I went through the dark hole, even through my dark hole moment, I started to find help, because I wanted to get out of it. Because you know me a bit, I'm a larger than life person. I love living life. I'm a person who sees a sunset every day, and it's like the first time you see a sunset, I'm that kind of person. And I lost that, and that really scared me. I couldn't enjoy a glass of wine. I couldn't enjoy a sunset. I could enjoy nothing. And one thing that my therapist told me that really stayed with me, which I thank her from here, was listen, this hurts so much because this mattered. And since this mattered, it needs to be grieved and honored. So after I started getting better and out of my dark hole, when the grief comes, which, comes in waves.
Yes.
On a day you're good, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoop, okay, there's the switch. In the beginning, you're like, what's going on? I was doing so well. Why am I feeling like that? Now I've learned, okay, it's here. Then I need to honor that because this grief was special to me. It was important. It's a person I've loved. I've lived the human connection. I've let myself love and be loved. And that is why it needs to be honored. So I sit with it, I cry it out, I do my stuff, and then I let it go until it comes back again.
What if you could start your journey over? Start here and start again there. That's how life works, in a circular way. We understand the importance of circles, and that's why you are at the heart of ours. Find your way to wellness with Browns.
My top prescription for aging signs, vitamin C and retinol.
New Lift Active Duo.
In the morning,
Pure vitamin C to boost skin radiance. And at night, pure retinol to boost regeneration. Wrinkles are reduced for 100% of women. 2 actives, 1 prescription. New Lift Active Duo. Vichy. Recommended by 50,000 dermatologists.
You've mentioned these stages of grief. In fact, each of you have mentioned these stages of grief. And I know that Anna is going to correct me here because we had a conversation just before we came on. Because if you research, there are 5 stages of grief. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I think this is where you guys were talking about this black hole. That is part of grief. That is part of the process. And we often talk about these as if they happen in order, moving from one stage to another. And you might say, well, now you've dealt with that stage, you're moving on to this stage, and then you've got this, and then we're out of it. But Anna, when we spoke...
that way, right?
Well, I'm going to guess that it doesn't. And we also spoke before, and you said, actually, there's a 6th stage. So I want to ask you, and each of your ladies as well, to describe your journeys, because you as Steph, you're going through this at the moment. You talked about coming out of this black hole. You Alison also said, talking about the coming out of this black hole, which is obviously a stage and a passage that you have to pass through. But Anna, tell me, what is the 6th stage? And are these not in a sort of lateral term, or do we skip between them? Should we not just get over denial and move on to anger and then move to bargaining, or how does it all exactly? Let's tick the box. We've done that one of grief.
Then it comes back.
Out of denial now.
No tick.
Now I have to go into bargaining. No, they're not linear. We are more complex than that. Of course, they are states of being, which are very real and very true. The Kubler-Ross came up with, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she was the pioneer when it came to grief. And
she was a woman.
Oh, yes, of course. It has to be.
Of course.
Sure. Sorry, chaps.
And then David Kessler he worked with her, and with her permission, of course, he added the 6th, which was finding meaning. And after this process, there is the process of finding meaning, where you've already mentioned, I honor, I remember more with love. That is
We're here
the meaning
talking
phase.
about
That's
it.
the meaning phase, exactly.
This is meaning.
It's like when you remember the person, not with that sharp pain, but you remember the person and the love keeps going. That is when you have found the meaning for it. When you say, oh, but if I hadn't had Jack, then I wouldn't have adopted. Then look at this. Look what happened afterwards. So you can see that there was some meaning to what happened. And that is the 6th stage.
But does everybody go through these 6 stages, or are there some situations of grief where you might skip 1 or 2, or is it literally you are going to go through these processes?
Yes, you are going to go through these processes.
So for you guys, do you identify with these now 6 stages? Do you feel like in your living grief that you're going through at the moment, have you experienced denial and anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance and now meaning?
Yes,
Can you
yes,
identify
yes,
that?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. 6.
You deny, this is the first thing that you do. Are you for real? Is that going to happen to me? Is this what's happening to me? No. So you deny it. It's too shocking. The system can't take it. So denial is very important. It's a creative adjustment, we call it in our lingo. It's too much to take. So we need to deny. It's important to deny.
These ladies are nodding, so I'm going to ask you guys to just tell us how just this part of it, this denial, really has come out in your experiences. I mean, can you relate to can you sort of describe how that affected you?
Unfortunately, Jack dying, I couldn't, there was no denying to that. He had passed away. I say in those days, in those times, 20 years ago, I was very lucky I was in England. Their bereavement, the way they go about, the way they went, because I don't know now in Malta, but at those times, they dealt with bereavement in a different way. So I used to get my baby every day near me, dead, because they believed that would help me process and grieve. That I just wanted to hold him and spend time with him. So they give you a leeway until he's thawed, and they bring him, and you have a cot next to you like the other mothers. Obviously, I was in a room on my own. I have photos with him.
True.
He looks
Asleep.
asleep. His daddy came. Friends came. I still look at the photos. Now I can look and, and I think it helped. You know what I ask myself? How did I do that? How did I do that? I don't think I'd be able to do it now.
Because it's not logical. We're not talking about logic, about reasoning, about the mind. We're talking about the heart. The heart is a different language. The heart needs time. It needs time to say goodbye. There's that kind of process, right? And you are lucky to be able to have that.
Yes, I was very lucky.
Not a lot of women have that.
No.
But then, and does that mean that Alison was able to bypass the denial phase?
Well, denial comes and goes. It's not a phase.
Okay.
It would come and go probably when she was told that there are complications. At first, you can't believe it, right? When you have, there is a sense of this is not happening to me.
Of course, your baby is dead, and my body is ready to breastfeed, ready.
Of course,
and you think I have it all for you. I have it all, and then you end up with cabbages on your boobs.
Too.
You know, that's all you end up with, a cabbage.
Yeah. Yes. How cruel.
It is
Yes.
very cruel. And I'm not one of those people who say, oh, because so many people who don't want to have kids end up having kids and they don't want them. We find a lot of things to try and blame, you know. I mean, I did go through that, but I was never bitter about it. I was never bitter.
I want to come to Steph as well, because whilst you were nodding frantically when Anna was talking about denial, Alison. So was Steph, because you actually, I mean, you were going through, like Alison, actually, you went through many things at the same time, because you were going through the loss of your mum, ultimately within a very close
the same
period of time.
Parkinson's, hallucinations.
But you were going through the grieving, obviously, for your relationship as well. Yes. And you were taking your mum to the doctor. So did you go through a denial stage?
When my mother got diagnosed, they told us it's dementia. Her mother had it as well, and we lived with it for 8 years. So when they told us it's dementia, I was like...
No, you can say it. It's okay. It's a podcast.
Fuck. Because I knew exactly what was coming.
Oh, wow.
I knew it. Although it's a very different kind of dementia. But in the beginning, I was like, okay, well, let's see what we can do. I go to doctors, different doctors, second opinions. Is there a cure or is there something?
Bargaining. That's the bargaining.
And is there something to slow down the process of this? What can we do? And trying to keep her active and taking her out more. But you go through the inevitable. What I think about the about the stages, is that according to your character also, some hit you harder than others.
So which hit you the hardest?
The pain. That's what hit me the hardest. For example, the anger is always the least I've had, somehow. Because in my mind, the cycle of life is that my mother needs to pass away.
This is the meaning that we place. You see how it changes the grief?
That's the cycle of life for me.
Meaning changes the grief.
How she's doing it, it's cruel, years, torture. That gives me anger, yes. But in my mind, this is the cycle of life. So I cannot be angry that she left us or she's leaving us, because it's the cycle of life. But I am angry about what she had to go through, because I know what I've lived with her. She was a wonderful mother. She was a wonderful human being to me, to my siblings, to all my friends. They used to come at home and we used to have the biggest parties. My mom was the life of the parties. We used to go abroad together. She was always like her brandies and she was always giggling and then when you see her there staring and you ask her something and she can't even say a sentence, like, and your heart just breaks.
What's really interesting, and I am really moved by both of your ladies being very open about your stories, but you've talked about the denial, you've talked about the anger. You mentioned yourself about the bargaining, and Anna said absolutely. You talked about the black hole and you talked about the depression. But the fifth stage is acceptance. Is that something, without being too impertinent, that you've been able to reach? Because I'm assuming meaning comes after that.
It comes and goes. Again, it's not phases. We have to be careful with the stages, right?
To be honest, if you tell me today, I say, yes, I've accepted it. Tomorrow I might tell you no.
That's right.
So
comes and goes.
It comes and goes.
Me too.
And I know that I still have to go through the physical part of this loss. So I know already that I still have another chunk of
another kind of
grief to go through.
And no matter how long you preparing for it, because we as a family had prepared for about 15 years for it.
With your mother?
With my mother. But when it came then, it's still exactly the same.
Of course.
It's double for us.
Yes.
So none of these stages of grief are on a lateral plane. They're not on a timeline. We're not going to say that grief is confined to 2 years, which is...
No.
You're saying, no, that's...
Please stop saying totally. It to
no,
people.
that is just...
I hate it.
It's just a fallacy. It's just the professionals, it's just trying to contain and prettify and and make it manageable.
Why?
Because if it is prolonged, it becomes very uncomfortable. And people are not ready to go into these spaces of talking like this because it triggers them. It can trigger their own pain. So people avoid. And we like to manage stuff. We like to manage the way we feel. Feelings especially are very uncomfortable, especially negative, what we call negative feelings. We don't really particularly like to go into them.
But Anna, if we're going through a grief process, if we're going through grief, and it is a natural process that we all face, and every human being at some point is going to face, from what I understand and what I've been looking at, and I really pulled myself up, and I spoke to you before we came and sat down at this table, because I had not really acknowledged that beyond just the mental pain, there are also physical manifestations.
Sure.
So digestive problems, weight changes are common physical symptoms of grief, often connected with disruption of normal eating habits or routines. Bereavement can cause temporary digestive systems problems such as constipation, diarrhea, stomach pain, a hollow feeling in the stomach, queasiness, and feeling nauseated. And I'm fairly sure that there are a list beyond that. Mm-hmm. But if we don't face grief as something real and something that everybody's going through, how do we on earth deal with the physical manifestations?
By medication.
Oh, for the love of Pete.
We like to medicate, you see. This is the Western society, Western culture. We deal with things with medication, with alcohol. Why do you think people drink or...
this is a very nice bottle of wine.
No, this is good. This is good stuff.
Anna said that, so it's okay.
No, but when I mean by alcohol, it means that, in the morning, the first thing you do is you pour yourself a drink and you hide your alcohol. We're talking about alcohol consumption that is
drowning your sorrows.
Drowning, yes. Or drugs.
Drowning your sorrows, which is a phrase that's been around for many, many years. And of course, it has a literal meaning.
Of course. But with women especially, we need to tell our story. And we need to be listened to. And we don't have the spaces for it.
Now, I'm just going to touch on that for a second because I do believe, and this is the reason that we are going to be hosting the He Word, is because I do believe from conversations that I've had that this is a topic that affects men as much as it affects women. And I think we also dismiss that. And I think that's going to be for the He Word.
What my brother and my father are going through in this journey is something completely different.
Because men are not entitled to have these conversations. And that's why I'm saying that we're doing the He Word in September, because it affects men as much as it affects women. However, today's conversation is about women. So we will be addressing it later on in the year. But if there are physical manifestations, I'm just thinking of somebody going through a grief process, and they go, and on top of that, I happen to be reading that, of course, grief can also destroy the collagen in your body, which means that maybe you suddenly age. And I mean this, I'm trying not to say this because I don't want to upset anybody at the table, but it can have many physical manifestations. But if you're already going through a grief process and suddenly your body is letting you down as well, I mean, my goodness, that is a double slap in the face.
Yes.
So I'm assuming that we need to acknowledge and just be a little bit more, not a little bit more, for the love of Pete, we need to embrace grief and acknowledge it and allow that to happen. But these physical manifestations come about why?
Well, the body keeps the score. It goes into the body. Our feelings are felt through the body. We have sensations. When you're going to cry, you have the sensation. And then you feel the feeling. You feel sad, right? So feelings are a body experience. They're sensations in the body. And they create different chemical balances. And what we do is when we shut down the feeling, the body still goes through those processes, but somehow it needs to contain them. It needs to hold them. So it holds them, and as we know, this kind of energy needs to go somewhere, and it goes in our system, in our lymphatic system, in our digestive system.
Lymphatic system meaning?
Lymph nodes, the nodes that we have, which is the lymphatic system is like the cleaner of toxins, right? It's like the cleaner of our body. And it is, thank God for the lymphatic system, because it cleans all our toxins. Now, if that it becomes all wanky, then we're going to have problems in our hormones, in our chemicals in the body.
I'm laughing because I had a joke. I'm sorry. I had a joke about this, that in 4 months, approximately, I lost about 20 kilos. And I used to tell my friends, I cried so much that it was all water retention. I cried 20 kilos out like that. And I was always a comfort eater all my life. So I used to get fat and fat. And I used to eat in these 4 months, and I just lost 20 kilos.
Wow.
And then the problems started coming then a bit later, but it took some time. You know, the eczema and allergies and these outbursts everywhere, hair loss, that came after some time.
Sorry. These are attributed to your grieving process.
Yes, of course.
Eczema, hair loss.
Yes.
What else did you mention?
After a long time. The weight loss, obviously. Yes.
Okay. So,
and I don't think I was one of the worst ones.
So these are
because I started taking care of myself then.
2 questions. So these are actual physical manifestations, not just as like I described, but also hair loss and skin conditions and so on. So you mentioned, and Alison's been nodding, and I'm going to come to you in a second, but you mentioned that you managed to deal with this. You dealt with it. So how did you deal with it? But how did you deal with this? How did you become aware that these were physical manifestations of the grief that you were going through?
Because you feel yourself falling apart completely. You lose both emotionally and physically the ability to live. And you know what you were before all of this. So you know that you're like an alien living in this body. This is not you. So then there comes the toughest part of all this. The day you decide you have to do something about it, because you can have the best support system in the world, you can have the best therapists in the world, but only you can instigate the change.
That's right. The journey is very personal.
Very personal.
It's a journey. It's like going on a mountain. You can accompany, but you cannot push anyone to go through and then get healed. You can't heal anyone. We, as therapists, we don't heal, we don't fix, but you can accompany, and you can show the way. But it's very personal. It's something which a person has to decide.
And that's why I hate it when people tell you, get over it. Because everyone's journey is different. And if by 6 months I am still not ready to get over it, then the moment you tell me that, you put me even backwards. Because then I start panicking that something's wrong with me and I'm bothering people and I can't talk about my problems.
And then it turns in, and then you turn inwards, and then it becomes completely isolated. You become isolated.
Yes, like. I'd really like to stress this out. And I want to come across as a nice person.
We love you, Alison. You're just gorgeous. Don't worry about that.
A declaration.
I'll tell you why. I know that people mean well when something happens. I know. I try and see the good in people. But for God's sake, when something terrible happens to somebody, like you, my dear, stop telling this person or any person who's lost someone, who's had a breakup, who, I don't know, anything to get over it. Issa time will heal. Issa soon.
Or they are angels in the sky.
That is my worst
down
one.
on you.
And I remember
for you.
I was so cuckoo
Yes.
when I was going through this anger phase with Jack.
Explode.
And people used to tell me, oh, don't worry. Now you have an angel in heaven.
That's
And
helpful.
he's going to pray for you. And he's going to take care of you. Okay. So once I was in a very bad mood and I had one of my mood swings. Okay. And this person was saying how, because she had a baby after me, and I don't know, she had a cough or something, and then she told me, I'm so sorry, you have an angel. And I said, I tell you what,
You give me your baby.
why don't you give me your baby? Huh? And then I'll tell you, it's okay, honey, you have a baby, but he's at Alison now because she took him.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah. You
It's
call it out.
better
You call
if-
it out. Uh-huh.
you say nothing. You know what I say? I send a message and I say, I'm here if you need me.
Exactly. That's what I say. as
You're
well.
in my thoughts. That's all.
That's all
I
you
think
can
there's
say.
one other thing, just going, I'm coming to you on physical manifestations in a second, Alison, because I love you. But something that Steph just said as well, I mean, something that I've really had to stop myself from saying, and I'd be interested to see all of your input, but I have very much stopped myself from saying, I know how you feel.
You don't know.
Because you don't know
You
how
don't know.
someone feels. You can say, I know how I felt in that in a similar situation, and you can say, I empathize with how you feel. But to say, I know how you feel, or Alison, I know how you feel,
Or else,
or Anna, I know how
I
you
know
feel.
how you feel because you know what happened to me?
know what happened to
me.
And then we hear the story.
Yes, absolutely, and I think it's diminishing of
course.
that person's
It's
experience.
dismissing. It's
Absolutely.
dismissing this person. Because this is what people who are grieving need. They need to be witnessed and they need to be heard without platitudes. So, and that's very hard. It's a very hard position to take. It's not easy. Without trying to console and trying to make them feel better. Because what we need to do as human beings is to make people feel good, right? We need to make people feel better. So when someone who is in such pain, you have the tendency and the compulsion to, oh, it's okay. Come on, it's okay. You feel the need to do that. It's not helpful.
But I think also something, and this is one of my questions that we'll come to in just a second. I'm still coming back to your physical manifestations, but it's one of the thoughts that I've had in more recent years is that instead of saying any of those platitudes, as you quite rightly said, and we'll come to what to say and what not to say, but one of the things I've really pulled myself up on is just to say, I see you. I recognize that you are in pain. I recognize that you are going through something I cannot experience, but my heart is with you. And I think just validating, and it's something that we've been learning through the she word, if someone is in a difficult situation or in a painful situation, I see you. That's it. You are seen.
And you know
are
what
seen.
the best people around you can do? They cook you dinner. They invite you over. I had one friend, a guy, who's not very good at talking feelings. But one day he told me, okay, I'm coming over. We're going to sit on a sofa, watch the wall, and wait until it talks to us.
No, that is a presence. You see, that's the presence.
Yeah.
And he came over with a home-cooked dish. And we sat on the sofa, and we chatted and we talked. And that is enough. That person can change your entire being. And from here, I need to thank my friends and my partner and my family, because I've had the best support system. Because yes, we talk about these negative comments, which I hear a lot. Even I hear a lot, well, but she's still alive. But she's still alive. That is the one I hear the most. She's still alive, she's still alive. But I need to thank my support system because they helped me to get out of that dark hole with little things. No big gestures, little things.
Before we move on, because I want to come back to you, Steph, because you just said something very profound, but I'm very mindful of the fact I still want to come back to Alison's physical manifestations, because you were
getting out of it.
You're not getting out of this, but you were going through, we've talked about the skin, we've talked about stomach problems, we've talked about all the ways that you can physically hold on to, as you very beautifully described, holding on to that pain, onto that grief. Did you find that for you? Did your grief and pain physically manifest itself?
Very much so. So I believe that when your body and your mind is not at ease, something's wrong, is not at ease, then it's called a disease. And I, unfortunately, had to go through that as well. Now, it doesn't come just like that. I worry, although I'm quite positive, but I am a worrier. I worry about my children. I worry about everything. Not me, really, but about the people I love. So, although I had the negativity of Jack's passing away, my mother. Then I had nice presents. I had Jordan, and at 40, I had a baby, and it wasn't an IVF baby. You know, it was all natural. So now I still have an 11-year-old, but I think that all the pain and all the bad stuff that went through physically and emotionally got stuck somewhere. It got stuck in there. And in 2019, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. Stage 4, very aggressive. I had just done my boobs.
My goodness.
I love the fact you share that. You were very, when I researched you,
was
were
a
very
Christmas
explicit about
present from my partner.
That's nice. But this is what found out you had breast cancer. So am I right in thinking, Alison, that you are attributing what you went through?
For sure.
Wow.
For sure.
Yes.
And this ties in, I mean, sorry, but I'm just going to ask you, is this possible?
Yes.
Whoa. Okay, fire away, Anna, because
The body keeps the score. This is not my title, of course. It's not me who's saying it. It's the eminent researchers who work with trauma and work with people who have gone through suffering. Because the body is something which is alive. It's all the time, just like us. It's moving. It's acting. So of course we react. So we react with our thoughts, with our experiences. So if our thoughts are very negative, for example, people who are very negative, you can see it. It's manifested. People who are positive, what we call the vibe.
Yeah.
right? You get a vibe from someone. It's not a vibe, it's not energy in the air, but it is because of what they are emitting from their body. It's their posture, it's the way they breathe, it's their smell. So, of course, it's all in our body.
So let me get this right, because I'm also seeing Steph and Alison nodding away, because this is new to me in preparation for this show, and I think for anybody who's watching this, who's going through a grief period right now, whether it be recent or whether it be however many years they're into it, that there is a physical manifestation of grief in the body that could be related to digestion. It could be related to something in the stomach, but it could also be, let's say, diarrhea or stomach pain. It could be skin conditions, and you mentioned also
hair loss.
Hair loss.
And I also had arthritis.
And arthritis. Whoa. So these are actual tangible conditions, and you yourself has said, and Anna has agreed, that you have attributed breast cancer to a grief process, or at least some of it.
Yes.
I mean, with all due respect, that's freaking profound. It's not a conversation I've ever heard anybody have before, that you can be going through a grieving process, whether it be for a living relative, whether it be for a child who's passed away, whether it be for whatever. It could be divorce. I know that I went through a grieving process for a number of years for the abuse that I suffered with my ex-husband. And it did. Now I'm looking back, I'm saying it absolutely physically manifested itself in my body. And you're saying absolutely, you're validating that and saying
anything
happens.
Stressful.
It's stress.
Anything stressful.
So when it is something which is very painful, very heavy, you're suffering. If you do it for, I don't know, a day or two, you can take it, that's fine. But if it's prolonged, and this is prolonged stress, it's not just one, it's 4 years. It's a long time. So it's like stress that is compounded. And of course, the body takes a toll because we secrete chemicals. And with stress, anything that you have which is a little bit weak, it's going to go, it's going to topple over.
So this isn't even a theory. This is an actual, physical, proven.
Yes, we know
concept.
For sure that, and you can heal from it in the sense that you can do things so that you can help yourself. So it doesn't mean that now we are, of course, because all of us, as you said in the beginning, we all suffer loss. We all have a number of losses. If I had to tell you, list down the losses that you have, we all can come up with a list. So we cannot bubble wrap ourselves and be safe and not have any of these stresses. I have lost my father to dementia as well recently. I have had a number of losses as well. So, and I'm a psychologist. So, you should know. You should know how to deal with stuff. Well, I'm a human being too, and I am going through things as well. So, we're all in this chicken soup together.
Let me come to the chicken soup and throw the chicken soup at Steph, because two things that Anna just said there is about how that you can deal with it. I mean, I want to ask you that first. You're acknowledging that had a physical manifestation in your body. How do you deal with that?
Physical, mental. And for me, it was body, mind, and soul. So imperative that I tackle the three of them. So what I'm going to say is my journey. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to deal with it. And it's not it's a healing process, but I'm not healed. This is how I deal with these things. So for my mind, I've never stopped going to my psychologist. Ongoing. Maybe I don't go every week anymore, but I go every month. I found a very good psychologist, which is like I can talk to a lot, and she sees me. So it's important, even if I'm feeling good, I still go. Because when I'm feeling good, usually the things come out more than when I'm feeling bad. 2, there needs to be a sort of body training. So for me, it's yoga. I've discovered yoga over the last 2 years. And what yoga does to my body and my mind, it's absolutely amazing. For that hour, I get so lost. Even if I go in there and I'm angry or I'm crying, and I've cried in so many yoga lessons, like doing the stretches and tears coming down my face, for me, it's a release. In fact, with my yoga instructor, I've done something which is called embodiment also, how to remove the trauma from the body through movement.
That's right.
So there's kind of movements and stretches you can do to remove that trauma from the body. And the soul is the spiritual part. Whether you believe in God, whether you believe in Buddha, whether you believe in anything, you need to meditate and pray every single day. If you don't do that, I know what happens. If I don't do these 3 things, I lose my balance. And then I'm not grounded anymore. And then when the grief comes, I can't handle it. I go crazy. So I need to keep my routine. And when I keep my routine, when the grief comes, I can do what I said in the beginning. Okay, let's sit with it and see what it wants today. Let's honor that. But when I'm not doing them, because, life happens, I'm busy, work and this and that. But when the grief comes, then I'm on the floor. And then it's my fault because I have the tools. But those are the tools that work for me. And it wasn't easy to find these tools. Everyone needs to find what works for him.
That's right.
And this is such a beautiful story from Steph, but how does everyone find the tools that work for them? How do you find those tools? And Alison, I'll come to you too, to find out how you found the tools. Your double whammy was that you were going through grief, and grief manifested itself in breast cancer. How do you find the tools? And then I'm going to come to you, Alison, to give you a minute to think about where you found the tools from. How do you find the tools?
Well, it's a difficult question because it's so personal, and different people deal differently, and they have different life stories before the event happens. So it depends what happened to you also before a death or a loss happened, because sometimes it is a trigger to past experiences as well. So someone who would have had particular difficult experiences before, when they have a loss, then it's piling it on. So they tackle it in a very painful way. I think nowadays it's more difficult, but in my parents' time, it was easier because it was honored more. Death wasn't sanitized. People talked about death. Mm-hmm. It was ritualized. Men wore black for a long period of time. So there was some kind of ritual. And that helps because we need rituals. And there was a community. There was the Nantia and the friends and the neighbors. And you could go to their house. You don't have to call before. You just go. We were in and out of each other's houses. And that helped, I think. And women sought out women. Women had these kind of conversations with other women. And nowadays, we don't really do that unless you have a good group of women. And I think women need women friends. It is very important for us. Men deal differently. But we are community seekers. We need this round table. We need to have this kind of space, not necessarily therapy, but a good friend or two, where you can say, I'm sad today, can I just sit here? Sure. And then you talk about, I don't know, what you cooked or what you're going to buy or about stupid things. Or, they used to do crochet or they used to do a knitting or a blanket together. There was this kind of community which has been lost. And we don't have it now. And when women meet, we don't really go to those places anymore. We talk about what for me is superficial things, which is very sad. And that's why we need to go back to that. We need to create this space like this to be able to talk and to be able to sustain this kind of experiences. So, and then different people deal with it in a different way, of course.
Which leads me on to asking Alison. I just to acknowledge and just say that what you just said there was absolutely beautiful about women supporting one another. Mm-hmm. And it's not an easy place to go to. It's not an easy conversation to have. But we have been conditioned in recent decades to bypass that and move on from that. And that's where we come to the whole thing of, okay, let's talk about something fluffy and gorgeous instead of talking about what really hurts. But you just mentioned about how we deal with pain. Steph has talked about the fact that she's approaching her pain from 3 different angles, which is the physical, the mental, and the spiritual. How, Alison, how did you approach your process of getting over Jack? And then, of course, you talked about, your son who came along, but you must have gone through a process to come out of this. And I want to be positive about this because I love what you said, which was very positive. There are 3 things that you're addressing right now to deal with your pain. But you also had breast cancer as well, which again produces grief. You're grieving for a physical trauma, which is one of the things that we probably don't recognize, the grief that is associated with that. There's a lot of things that we can grieve about that we don't acknowledge, and we just say, get the hell on with it. Yeah. How did you deal with this?
This is an easier grief because I did reconstruction.
Nice. I like the smile on your face.
But you know what? Nothing... I don't know. I mean, I might sound like a real, idiot, but nothing comes close to losing a son. So I have learned slowly, not, to develop thick skin, crocodile skin. I have learned to be strong, not nasty or anything or bitter, but I was lucky that I had a very good support system. I've had my friends for over 35 years, so I am really lucky.
That's right.
You
see, it's her friends came up in both stories.
I have childhood friends as well. We've been together for over 20 years.
And my partner was a godsend. He was worse than me. Going in for the operation, I'm like, I'm going to put some mascara after before I go for the operation. You can't put makeup. Yeah, it doesn't matter. I'll put some lipstick on. And he's like dying. So everyone had his number to see how he was. And I tell him, no, everything's going to be fine. Yes. I tell him.
Yes, you're consoling him.
I'm going to be fine.
But you mentioned, this was really interesting, because you mentioned about your benchmark. Basically, you said that my benchmark was losing my son, and anything beyond that I could cope with.
I can.
So how did you then, I'm going to come back to the same question, what was your process? We've talked about the 6 stages of grief, when the last of which is finding meaning. How did you then find a way out of that process? How did you start coming out of that? Steph has identified the three elements that she has to address, and yoga has helped her, and being spiritual, addressing your spiritual life has addressed you.
Okay.
So what was the beginning of your path? How did that start?
Look, I worried mostly about my children, because my older son had just gotten a scholarship to go and play football abroad, and he was still 16. And I didn't want to spoil it for him. He was going to England, and I didn't want to spoil it. So I wanted everything to be normal, what was normal to us. I wanted the same routine. I asked to continue working, although I didn't know what was coming, but I never stopped. Obviously, my bosses were great, you know. And my son, who was 6 at the time, and I had long curly hair, and he loved it, was always playing with my hair, and I was more worried. So I tried to keep it together, but I did it effortless. Only when I was very, very sick, I couldn't. When I was oblivious to the world, you know, after chemo, I was very sick. I got through it by going through it in a normal, like nothing happened. I knew I had cancer, but let's say instead of my blow dries, I used to spend my money on all the turbans and all the color for every outfit. I had one. Mm-hmm. And it was a pleasure going to work. And they said, oh, sweet, you are today wearing this and this and this and makeup. And that is how I sailed through it. It wasn't easy. Especially, I had brand new boobies. I was eager to show them off.
I love your honesty.
And 3 months, not even 3 months, I had one.
Wow.
You know?
Yes. But the meaning is having children. So for her, having children
yes,
gave her that sense of meaning, of being able to engage with life again. Because this is when you heal. When you heal is when you're ready to engage with life, not despite the grief, but with the grief. This is a key. It's not because the grief is gone. The grief doesn't go. But with it, you create a life. And that is when a person heals.
We've looked at this from 2 aspects. We've looked at it from the person that is grieving and the people around them. And I think I just want to touch on what you just said there and come back to this as a personal experience and an experience of the people around you, because I want to highlight the fact that throughout this discussion, we've said you have to acknowledge the grief. If you're going through a grief journey, you have to acknowledge it. You have to embrace it. You have to not avoid it. And this is what you've just rightly said a minute ago, that cultures past, decades past, that death and grief was honoured.
Yeah.
And it was given place in society. And maybe today we've moved away from that. And we've gotten to the point where we're in such a fast-paced society. Okay, your grieving is done. Let's move on. Let's go forward. And of course, that physical, I'm still blown away by this idea of physical manifestation, whether it be through putting on weight, whether it be through losing weight or a skin condition or breast cancer, whatever. That grief has a physical manifestation. If you don't deal with it, I assume that physical manifestation is just going to continue. I love the way that you described that. So this is the personal grief journey, but also there's the journey that the people around you are going through. And both of these beautiful ladies and yourself have talked about the network, the support network. So I want to touch on what you, and I'm going to ask you as well, Anna, you just mentioned that you've had your own loss. What have been the helpful and positive influences that people around you have had, and what is the negative? Because we are out of sync of talking about this. You said it throughout the show. We don't deal as people in 2024. We don't deal with grief very well.
Not at all.
But it's going to happen either way, right?
Yeah.
So how can we assist the people? What would have been the words that any of you women at this table would have really loved to have heard or did hear, or actions that you mentioned, Steph, about people bringing you dinner, etc., and the things that were most unhelpful? Because I think we need to address that. I remembered Tamara Webb once said in the show that we had, the first show of parenting, don't ask a new mother how the baby is, ask her. And it's something that I've taken away as a life lesson that I try to apply every time. And I think I'd like to get some life lessons here on the table for anybody that's supporting or near someone in a grief situation, whether it be divorce, whether it be losing their job, whether it be losing their home, whether it be losing their partner, their child, their parent, whatever it is. So what is helpful and what's not helpful?
Well, what's not helpful is the words starting a sentence with at least. At least you have another child when a mother has a miscarriage, right? When you have a miscarriage is not talked about. That's another whammy. At least you have another child. I got that. I had a miscarriage between my two children. I faced it alone. It was the most isolating experiences I've ever had in my life because it was unacknowledged by everybody. And because I had another child, because I had my first one. So at least you have your first child. But it's a loss. It's a loss. A loss is a loss is a loss.
Of course.
It cannot be compared. You can't say, sorry.
No. Go on, you're the doctor.
So the starting a sentence with at least is very dismissing. It dismisses the loss.
Yes.
At least, I don't know, you survived it.
At least she's still alive.
At least she's still alive.
Yes.
At least we say this automatically, but it's so dismissive of the pain and of the situation. كمان منك. Yeah, there are people who are worse than you.
Of course.
Why would you say that to anybody in a grievance?
And you know something else that I forgot to say, and I wanted to say it because I went through it. I didn't have a miscarriage. Okay. I'm not talking about Jack here. But I had 5 IVFs. And in between, I don't know how many IUIs. Okay?
Which are
artificial insemination.
Okay.
Trying to get pregnant, because an IVF, you have to get ready for it. You have to prepare physically. Okay? That, may I add, is like going through a menopause every time.
Yep.
Every time. Now, people who are doing IVF, and even couples who are trying to have a child, and every month it fails, that is grieving.
That's right.
That is grieving. And I used to take it so badly. I hate pregnancy tests. I hate them. In fact, when I was pregnant with Ollie, and I thought, Zef,
it's not gonna happen.
Now I'm 40, this is my menopause. And my cousin told me, you have a pregnancy test. No, I couldn't because that was always negative. No. And then I start the grieving period again.
That's right.
You know?
Exactly.
And
so this kind of what is when we're trying to help people, don't go into these platitudes. Don't go into I know how you feel. Yes, of course, this because it does not help. Absolutely.
Steph, what are you've mentioned this, and and I'm asking you to repeat because I think we need to keep saying this. But you were saying that where people around you kept saying to you, well, at least your mum is still alive. I mean, is this something that
That's
there was
one thing, the dismissing, and you need to get over it and you need to move on. I think those are the things that hurt the most. And in the beginning, they really used to agitate me because I used to say, I'm doing something wrong. People are not happy with me talking, or I'm annoying people.
It's past my time limit.
It's like there was a time limit, and now, okay, we've talked about it for 6 months and we can't talk about it anymore. But having said this, these people are there, but in my case, there are a few.
Yeah.
And those I've learned to ignore now.
Yeah.
So I need to talk about the good ones and the good support system that I have around me. And when it comes to what they all do something differently. And this is the most special thing. In fact, once for Christmas, to my girls, I gave them a big heart and they got a piece each. It was a big wooden heart and they got a piece of the puzzle each because they all gave me something differently. One of them gives me hope. Whenever I speak to her, there's hope. Another one is my distractor. Okay, let's go out, change, let's go. We're going. There's no feeling, but she's my distractor. Another one will take me to logic. Okay, we need to analyze, and I need that. Another one will just sit with me when I really, really cry. So all of them, and there's the one who swears, I love that one. When I'm really done, she's like, she's my up, and she swears and she gets angry and, so everyone gives you something different and you just have to be open to receive, because we talk a lot about the negative, and yes, the negative is there, but there is so much good. And through all this experience, there was a point in my life when I said, I must have done something really good in my life to be getting all of this back.
Of course.
That's right.
Because people started coming out from everywhere. They started coming out from everywhere. Doesn't mean that it doesn't get lonely at times. And when I find someone who's going through a living situation, I try to talk, because that person is the one that can relate to me the most. And I can go a bit deeper with that person. But all of them, people can help in different ways. You just have to allow them. So my suggestion to anyone who's close to people who are grieving, just assist them in the best way you know how, without a lot of pat. Because we talk so much sometimes, and sometimes the only thing you need is someone telling you, get out of your pajama, we're going out now. Or I'm coming over right now and I am cooking you dinner. Or, it's all the little different things. And even saying it's like a reminder to me, because I'm so appreciative of all these people in my life that, yes, I had to be the one to get myself on my feet. But if they weren't there with me, I'm still probably in that black hole. So
I've learned so much from this show. I really have. And in a minute, I'm going to ask you for your believe it or not, closing thoughts. I think this is going to be a discussion that we have again. But I have learned, and I'm asking for some guidance from Anna as well in what I'm saying, is that grief does not have a timeline. And grief, we talked about these 6 stages of grief. The new one that you came in, which is the finding meaning for what you've been through. It's not linear. You don't pass from one to the other. They can all happen all at the same time, and you can experience a mix of emotions all at the same time.
Yeah.
But there is no time frame. It's not 6 months to 2 years. That's where some wonderful psychiatrist or someone came up with that and said, that's the time frame. And that is because we don't like to talk about it. And that's like, we want to put it in a box.
That's right.
The most profound thing that I've learned during the course of this show is that you both, ladies, backed up by Anna's expertise, are saying that there is physical manifestations of grief. We have to go through that process because there's no way of avoiding that process, because if it doesn't come out in expressing it and talking through it and dealing with it, it's going to come out in a physical way and may come out in a physical way at the same time.
Sure.
Also, I loved, Steph, what you talked about the 3 ways of dealing with your grief: physically, mentally, and spiritually. I love your positivity, Alison, just how you've dealt with things and you've seen that your way of healing was to pour yourself into a family and have a new beginning, find new meaning. And even when you lost your beautiful boobs.
Yes. But they're on the way. They're coming.
We need to meet again and celebrate them.
I do think we should have a she-word boob celebration party. Yes. Absolutely.
I need a cake with the boobs.
With the see, Anna's. I'm
already thinking.
But I want to ask for your closing thoughts. We've shared a lot of thoughts and a lot of really positive information and ideas during the course of this show. But how would, for anyone going through a grieving process right now, what would your words of wisdom be? Or even, let me just say, or even the people around someone who's grieving.
Look, everybody goes through difficult times, shitty times in a different manner, okay? People are different. As I'm talking about us as people who are surrounding these people, we need to support these people by being positive towards them. But doesn't mean that we are going to make them feel, as my friend here said, that there's a time limit. It's get on with it. Things will be better. Thank God she's still alive. I have a friend who is at the moment fighting cancer. And sometimes all she needs is to go. Even if we say nothing. We sit down near each other. And another thing that I've been wanting to say this, my passion and our children. People, you will never know what people are going through in their private life.
Exactly.
So let's try and be a bit more understanding. And don't say these things. So how long have you been married now?
No kids.
No babies yet. No no ban in the oven. No. Don't. Because I know how much it hurts. It hurts. These people might be grieving. They might be dead inside. So please, let's try and be nice in general. You know, if you don't know what to say nothing.
That's right.
Alison, you just said something that's absolutely fundamental and I stand by. Not one single person on this planet really truly understands what another human being is going through any way, shape or form at any time. And I think bearing that in mind, we need to be mindful of what we say and how we communicate and how we judge one another, because somebody might be going through a grieving process like you are, like I could be. And that judgment, those comments, I've experienced them myself when I found out I couldn't have children and somebody asked me when I was going to get on and have kids and then judged me and said how my poor mother, because I wasn't giving her grandchildren. Shit, I was grieving for the fact that I found out I couldn't have children.
I started a relationship with a woman.
Oh.
I had to grieve the fact that I would never have my own children with the person I love.
Steph, talk to me for a second, following up from what Alison has said about her wise words. What are your closing wise words? What, from your experience of going through this grief process, what would you recommend for yourself, for anybody that's going through a grief process, or the people around them, or both?
I think my first shout out would go to people who are living with someone who is diagnosed with a terminal illness. Whether it's dementia or anything that's terminal. Because this is where the grief comes in. And I know that especially in the beginning of all this, it's very, very confusing and it's very lonely. So my first appeal is reach out, read, try to find help. I went and found a course about dementia. I went and tried to talk to my psychologist. There's a lot of things you can do. Doesn't mean what I did will work for everyone. Just don't close yourself off. This is my first, because there are a lot of people like you. For example, dementia is really on the rise in Malta. Do we talk about it enough? It's rarely mentioned, and it's very, very dismissed because, oh, it's dementia, old people have it, and that's it, you know? So that is my appeal for people who are going through this. Find a support system, find a support group, find someone who can help you, find information that you can deal better with this. And for the people around, be empathic as much as you can. We all have our baggage, and the only thing we can do is help each other carry it. That's all. My story is not better than hers. My story is not better than anyone's, or it's not sadder. We all have our stories, and no story is less than mine. We just need to help each other carry that. That's all. And that would be a much better word, because I've experienced it. People have helped me carry my baggage, and I have helped others, and it makes a world of difference.
Anna, closing thoughts with you.
How can I add stuff to that? She said it. Grief is an equalizer, right? It makes us all equal in the sense that we all experience loss. So it's not one is less than another or more than the other. We all grieve in different ways, and we cannot compare losses, because I've lost my father who is 93 years old. Cannot be compared with someone who loses a child. Grief is grief. It's the experience is pain. So in that pain, it's an equalizer. It's the same. Of course, the event is different, but we shouldn't compare, because most of the time we compare. We say, he was old, Mala, he should, it was a natural thing. So you shouldn't feel so bad. So let's let go of the shoulds. This language of shoulds. We need to let go of it. We are not here to judge others or to make them feel better. We're here simply to be present with and to connect with. It's very important. We've lost this ability. We need to learn it again. And we as psychologists, we need to teach it. That's why I'm here, because we need to emphasize that we need to connect with each other.
Beautiful words. I want to say thank you very much indeed, ladies. I really appreciate you coming on what is a difficult show, a difficult topic, a difficult area to discuss. But I have no doubt.
Come back to talk about sex or lesbians or something fun.
Yes.
Okay. Cheers for that.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the space.